Welcome to Blueprints for Liberty, Designing the Freedom Cities of Tomorrow. This is a podcast that explores the visionary concept of freedom cities and how we can create living environments that prioritize individual liberty, social harmony, and equal opportunities for all. We look back through history to see how the past informs the future and how people can self-organize in their communities to support self-sufficiency. We also look to develop leaders that are moral and ethical in a world that is spinning out of control. Tune in to be part of the conversation shaping the future of our communities.
Here we go. Hello and welcome, everyone. Glad you've joined us again today. Today we have Tulio Siragusa, and I'll let him introduce himself and his organization, what he does, and a little bit of his background, and then we'll just jump into the conversation from there.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's good to be here. Yes, I'm Tulio Siragusa. I'm the founder of Inventrica Advisory. I'm a fractional executive and neuroscience-based coach. I work with small companies to mid-sized companies, helping them increase their operational capacity without adding an additional headcount. I do that with the framework that I created called the EmpathIQ framework, which is a result of 36 years being an operating executive and helping companies grow and all the challenges that come along the way to do so. So I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, my focus is on what I call harmonic leadership, and it's leading when you're not the leader. And in my conversations with Tulio, we discovered that his approach is very similar to mine. And typically, what I focus on is I use the analogy of harmony in music, whereas a lot of times we look at leaders as the soloist, the person out front, the person who's in charge and gets all of the attention. Where in harmonic leadership, everybody has a role to play, everybody's role is important, and there isn't necessarily a hierarchy. And thus, finding that balance and that tension between individuals, just like in music, finding the balance and the tension in between the different musical attributes of the different people participating in the musical event, whether it's singing or an orchestra or a band or whatever. When you find that tension that works, it's just beautiful and it's richer and it's fuller and it brings about a much more robust experience. So I'll turn that back to you and you can explain how your framework helps to accomplish that.
I look at the way we organize ourselves. Most organizations are very codependent. You've got one person that everyone depends on, and then you've got a lot of people pushing for independence, which is the other side of the spectrum. And I really mostly focus on interdependence, which is how nature works.
Mhm.
And in nature, there is a hierarchy, but the hierarchy is really a purpose, which is to sustain life. So everyone contributes to the hierarchy and everyone's giving. The sun gives, the plant gives, the water gives. It's a constant state of giving. It's given to itself to sustain life. And so that interplay is a beautiful harmony that sustains life. But for some reason, when it comes to how we work as humans, we decided that we don't want to participate the way the rest of life works, right? The way the rest of existence works, which is interdependent. So we've adopted these control models, these command models, which has not really served us. So when I think about how you create interdependence at work, for example, first of all, it's on the basis of equivalence, which means Everyone has the ability to contribute to the well-being of everyone else. But I don't buy into this idea of, not having hierarchy, because you do need to have a guiding star. The hierarchy, though, isn't titles or position. It's really a purpose, right? If you define your company's purpose, that becomes your North Star. And then the people that are willing to serve the others the most end up getting followed because it's a natural thing to follow those who want to serve you. So that hierarchy happens through merit and through the basically desire of being of service. And when that comes together really well, there's studies now that have found that organizations that operate this way are extremely more profitable, to the tune of 7 to 10x more profitable. They're more engaged, so 76 to 80% employee engagement, as opposed to what Gallup has recently found, where it's 21% globally and 31% in the United States, which means if you have a $10 million yearly labor budget, you're only getting the value of $2.1 million of that. So imagine like telling all your employees to go home for 8 months, but only working 2 months out of the year. That is the equivalent of the productivity that most companies are getting globally because people are disengaged, because of these command and control models that are codependent. People don't feel empowered. People don't feel a sense of purpose. And so my framework, the Empath IQ framework, is designed to activate four key tenets of highly engaged cultures. And the first one is we all have a desire to belong to something greater than ourselves, which is why, religion and politics is so big. We all have a desire to have meaning behind our lives, behind what we do. It's also the same reason those systems are so big, and also why people have families. And also the desire to make an impact that is innate in all of us, which is why people join movements, volunteer their time. Activism is a big thing. And again, why people have families, why entrepreneurs start companies, it's the desire to make an impact. And finally, the desire to be becoming, which is why the self-help industry is like $1 trillion, right? We all desire to become more, to grow. And so if you create a model where in the organization those four tenets are harmonized, then you have a really an unstoppable team, right? But to do that takes some effort, some intentionality. It doesn't just happen through accident, it's through design. And so that's why I created this framework to intentionally design these models where you can get high engagement, where people can feel good about showing up to work. And, imagine people who show up to work and they feel good about being there, and then they go home, and at the dinner table, you hear them talking, raving about how great their day went, and their kids are watching this and thinking, wow, it must be nice to go to work, right? As opposed to what happens now. People go home, they rant about their boss, they rant about their peers, and the children are watching this saying, gosh, I really don't look forward to going to work. It's like a horrible place. It's a hostile place. So the impact is not just at work. The impact this can have is in your family, in your community, and even societally. It can have a dramatic impact in improving the way people feel and the way people operate. And so I feel that what a leader's role really is, it's a calling. It's not about title or position. It's about serving people. And we spend most of our days at work. So if we can create a model where people can feel engaged, empowered, they have meaning behind what they're doing, they can make an impact, they can grow. I think what we end up with is better society as well. And we all know we could use a happier society for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So before we dig into more of the nuts and bolts of how it works, um, another concept that I have found interesting, and in my discussion with you, um, you were very familiar with, which most people aren't, is it's usually associated somewhat with the crypto industry because crypto is a very decentralized currency, that we have these distributed autonomous organizations or DAOs. and they are built on this idea of a distributed workforce as opposed to, a centralized, think of it along the same lines as cryptocurrency. Usually we have a centralized bank, a centralized currency, and everything kind of aligns to that. Whereas you get into the crypto world, and it is kind of like the wild, wild west these days, which is kind of fun in a lot of ways, but it's also allows a lot more, personal ownership and decision making about my own finances and my own ways of investing. So talk about how this distributed organizational structure of like a DAO may, not the nuts and bolts of how it works, but kind of at a high level, what it
Yeah.
means.
Distributed and decentralized autonomous organization, DAOs, or basically the equivalent of self-managed organization. The way, which is one of the reasons why people who think this way could understand blockchain and crypto very quickly because it's designed to give the user or the person ownership, which is why, even like when you think about FTX, it was such a huge failure because it wasn't really a blockchain solution. It was run like a fiat. Someone was in charge of it instead of you being in charge of it. That's why it failed. So in any case, the premise of this is that we're all equal and we're all adults. And um, adults make difficult decisions every day, whether to get married, whether to get divorced, whether to have children, whether to buy a house, where to live, whether to get a surgery. There's so many decisions we make, difficult decisions every day. So we're perfectly capable of making those decisions if we have the information and the tools to make wise decisions. So when you are in an environment where only a few people have all the data and all the information about the company, it's very difficult for people to make decisions because they're relying on one or two people or a group of people saying, this is what we need to do. And if they're nice, they might say, here's why we need to do it. But in many cases, like, here's what we need to do, go do it. Right. So now here's an adult perfectly capable of making decisions on their own, being treated like a child. That's not very engaging. That's disempowering versus an organization where it says, here's all the opportunities we have, and here's all the challenges we have. How are we going to go tackle them? So it's not so much of go make this happen, even with all the information. It's asking the question. The foundation is to be curious. How are we going to tackle this? And then to empathize with what the problem is, having people step into that problem solving, which, by the way, is our nature as human beings. We are problem solvers by nature. In fact, so driven by the desire to solve problems that if we have a life without problems, we create problems
True.
just to go solve them. I mean, there's a little piece of psychology for us. If you find yourself constantly causing problems in your life, it's because you need to solve them. So, maybe tackle something bigger, like go solve a bigger issue so you don't create problems for yourself. But that's what we do. We love to solve problems so much that we'll create them in order to keep ourselves in a state of problem solving. So by nature, we have this ability to problem solve. So if we give people the right tools and the right information, we also are very social creatures. And you create a model where people can collaborate in a distributed fashion, in a decentralized fashion. Then you have the collective intelligence of the collective wisdom that bubbles up through a number of people who are problem solvers by nature, who have the right tools, the right information, who are curious about how to solve a problem, who are collaborating on a sense of equivalence. So no one's trying to impress the boss. Everyone's just helping each other solve the problem. So what you end up with is an environment where you can't compete with that environment. And you have really no silos in that environment, which is why intentionally part of the transformation I work with companies to introduce collaborative OKRs where people can collaborate on a goal on a quarterly basis and people can volunteer what goals to focus on. And they can be champions for those goals. They can be supporters or they can even be observers. If you want to just learn, maybe you're a software developer and someone's working on a go-to-market strategy redefinition. and you want to learn what that's all about. So you can join that team as an observer because you want to grow. It tackles the desire to grow. And then naturally you'd like to make an impact. So you'll often, even though you're an observer, you'll often provide input and ideas, sometimes really novel, great ideas where innovation's born out of the places you least expected. So now your job also has a greater meaning. You're not just in your lane, you're participating in something bigger, and it creates greater meaning toward what you're doing because you're impacting the bigger picture. You're involved in the bigger picture. So when you start doing that, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out how fast things can move, how more effective things can be, how much more transparency is in an organization like that and visibility. And you don't have to sell your team on a change. They're owning the change to begin with. They have the data, they have the ability to move it forward, to solve the problem collectively and together. So there's no selling, there's no change management. It's done from the bottom up. And so in that environment, in these decentralized or distributed autonomous environments, things move quickly. They're agile, they're intuitive, and you get the benefit of having more collaboration. And the impact of that is you have the need for less people. You don't even need a middle management layer. So I just eliminated probably millions of dollars in your budget for the middle management layer. You don't need that. That's just wasting money. So you've got more efficiency built into this model. You can move faster. You got less kingdom owners with middle management. So people work together in pods. They can move things faster, which means you can get more done with less people. In many cases, 3x what your normal capability is. And so that dramatic impact to your productivity, to your efficiencies goes right down to your bottom line, right to your revenue, to the shareholder value you're trying to create. And I use that term shareholder value because a lot of companies, that's their purpose, to create shareholder value. And they will say, well, we have to have these models of controls to ensure we're driving shareholder value. And the problem with that is that's not the most strategic model to create shareholder value. The most strategic model to create shareholder value is actually a decentralized autonomous organizational model. For the same reason I just mentioned. You move faster, you're more efficient, ultimately creating better productivity, more engagement, more happy employees, create more innovation. Hence, all that translates into revenue, which creates shareholder value. So the problem is we are so tied to an old system of doing things. Like the Industrial Revolution gave birth to great advancements, right? But it was needed to have very rigid processes. Otherwise, people's lives were at stake, right? If you're building stuff and you got machinery, you can literally die if you don't follow stringent processes. So the command and control model worked in that industry, in that era. It was necessary. But we've since left that and moved into the knowledge space or the self-actualization space. But companies still operate under this old command and control model, which was born out of the Industrial Revolution. But it doesn't work because it keeps people bounded. It doesn't allow them to bubble up their best. It doesn't allow them to grow. It doesn't allow them to make an impact. It doesn't allow them to create meaning behind what they're doing. It doesn't allow them to feel like they belong to something greater than themselves. It makes them feel like a cog in the wheel, which is fine in the Industrial Revolution. You needed those cogs, but not the way we operate today. So there's a disconnect, right? And that disconnect translates into lack of shareholder value. And so what do companies do? They fire people, hire different people, and then still have the same processes and they struggle and they go up and down. They're always on chasing shareholder value, but their strategy is operating in an old system that doesn't work anymore. So there's an opportunity to transform and to evolve into this model, but it requires change and rewiring, especially at the leadership level, right? You're no longer needing to think of yourself as having climbed the ladder and you got to the top. Now this is the best place to be. This is where the prestige and the power happens, right? Most people get to that level as a CEO, find themselves very lonely up there. Like this sucks. I was promised this is the place you want to be. This is not fun here.
Mhm.
If you have the wrong infrastructure, if you have an organization model where people are empowered to be co-leaders, that's a great place to be because now you get to do what you love to do. And so does everybody else. So there's freedom, not just for the employees, there's freedom for the CEOs as well, for the executive team, where they're not having to make every decision. The weight of the world is not on their shoulder, but they have to shift their thinking into being servants, into being coaches. And for some of the old timers, that's difficult because we came from that command and control model. But we have this innate desire to make an impact. So it's not very hard to make that transition to understanding how do I make an impact? Well, it's not going to be in the revenue, it's going to be in the people. If I can help people grow, if I can help people step into leadership, the byproduct of that is impact on the revenue. But you have to shift your thinking. It's about the people. And when organizations that do that, studies from Deloitte, McKinsey show they do extraordinarily well. So it works. It's not just good for people. It's a good business model and business strategy that works.
So that makes me think, okay, talking about business models and looking at it from a legal perspective in terms of how you structure, we've all heard of C Corps and S Corps and now B Corps. Many, you might want to go into that because a lot of people might not know what a B Corp is. And, partnerships and things like that. So from a legal perspective, how do you set things up? Do you have shareholders? And who are those shareholders? I know from it, my own personal knowledge, not necessarily experienced in DAOs or DAOs, is everybody is an owner, everybody is a shareholder. But we always, I mean, even me, as I think as forward thinking as I am and love this idea and this concept, I'm like, but who's in charge? Who's the person that
Yeah,
ultimately makes the decisions? How does that work?
it's a very good question. And there are a lot of different models that um, it's not a one size fits all. And a lot of self-management model, they're really designed around enlightened monarchs is the best way to say it. My co-founders of radicalpurpose.org, one of them just passed a few weeks ago.
Mm.
But he always used to say, most self-management organizations are run by enlightened monarchs, right? Um, and then he and a few others wrote a book um, that And then we all agreed that self-management will only take you so far. You have to have co-ownership in order to really create the kind of things that I'm talking about. And co-ownership, most organizational models, even corporations, are not designed that way, with the exception maybe of a partnership. So a partnership is probably the closest to an operating model where everyone's a co-owner and leader of the organization. B Corp, they're purpose driven, but they're still, hierarchy, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can even have a traditional corporation with non-traditional operating model. I know one company in Israel, I forget the name of the company, they have every 2 years they vote for their CEO and anyone can run to be the CEO. And the CEO is just a position in the company that does the corporate stuff, but that CEO doesn't have any power to fire or hire. It's done through teams. Um, and some of these companies have scaled to thousands, tens of thousands of employees. So it works. But there is a definite challenge. Like you can have a self-managed organization and there's a few that have the ownership and they decide to sell the company. And those few decide the fate of everybody else. So it's not really, you know, co-ownership. So the there really needs to be a new model that can enable this. And at radicalpurpose.org, we even went as far as creating a new stock ownership model called RADs. And these RADs are basically based on your contribution and your length of contribution. You can request to the teams, this is what I think my salary should be. Here's what I'm willing to contribute. And it's all decided collectively, right? So like a partnership would. But that means you can also step away in the future and you've earned a certain amount of ownership, which means you can get dividends. And so we've experimented with some of these things, but there isn't a model that fits this, except maybe the partnership model. That's the closest thing that comes to. You have cooperatives, you have B Corps, but the partnership model is designed where there's not one person who's the owner. It's a collective ownership, and they will vote someone who might be, let's say, the managing partner because they have some intrinsic ability to serve others in a way that's beneficial to the whole. But that should be a very democratic thing to get to that place. So it's not a one size fits all, really. If you want to go really far with it, probably a partnership with voting of the leadership is probably one of the closest things that can achieve truly decentralized and empowered organization.
So who's in charge of hiring and firing and doing performance evaluations? And, if somebody isn't carrying their weight, how do you deal with situations like that?
It's a great question. There are two rules to these models, and anyone who thinks it's chaos, it is actually very structured. The first rule is no violence, which means no coercion, no forcing people to do anything, no using fear tactics. And the second is absolute 100% self-accountability. You can't have freedom without self-accountability. Now, in a traditional company, I can hide out for months. There might be one person in charge of all the hiring and firing, and then there's a large organization around them, and you could be somewhere in the organization just hiding out for months. No one's holding you accountable because you have only one person that can hold you accountable, and they're so far removed from your day to day that they just don't have time to get to you. It might be months before they get to you. In a self-managed organization, you can't hide out for more than days because everybody works as a team. It's pods. You organize around functions. Okay, we have some functional things we need to take care of. We need to take care of our customer. Okay, so who takes care of customers? Well, we got account management, delivery people, you've got analysts, you've got developers, you've got different functions to serve the needs of a client. So you put all those people in there, that becomes its own pod. That pod operates like its own little franchise. They have a P&L and they manage their little business as a team. If someone's not pulling the weight, anyone in the team can say, I've noticed something here. I want to help this person to see what's going on with them. And a committee's put together, and a committee might say, okay, we want to talk to you, see what's going on. We've noticed you've been hiding out. Obviously, they wouldn't use those words. I'm just highlighting what could happen. And the intent is not to go fire them, it's to course correct, right? Because what you're doing is you're operating as a friendship. A lot of companies like, we're a family. I'm like, why do you want to be a family? Some family members are dysfunctional and you don't get to choose them. I mean, you have to tolerate them. You don't get to. Friends choose each other, right? So what do friends do? True friends will support each other when someone's down, celebrate each other's wins. That's not, they don't compete, they celebrate each other and call each other out. They don't sell each other out when someone's going off track. Hey, what are you doing? You're going off track here, right? A good friend will do that. So in that model, there's collaborative agreements that are put in place between each other and those teams, right? So you organize around certain functions you need to accomplish, and you create teams around it, and all those teams have agreements with each other on how they're going to support each other. Even to the point of like how long you can wait to respond to a question or a request. They have almost like these SLAs between each other because you want to be 100% accountable to each other. You can't just bow out. Like, I don't want to do anything. No, you are accountable to the success of the business. You're accountable to your peers. That's the agreement. That's what affords you that freedom. That's why you don't have anyone looking over your shoulder. You don't have anyone to go impress. There's no rubber stamps of approval. You're operating with all the knowledge and all the transparency you need to run your business as a team. And if someone's fallen off track, then get them on track. And then you have the choice as a team if someone's not in alignment to fire them, right? As Gary Ridge of WD-40 said, share them with your competitors. Um, so, so, so there's tremendous responsibility that sits with everyone in that environment. Not one person can fire you, but anyone can bring a case if they have a valid reason to have a committee look at what's going on. And that's how it works. Is high accountability. It's the only way it will work. You can't have, people that will just sell each other out. You have to support each other in that process. And the churn and the firing is extraordinarily low in those environments because people understand I need to show up for my teammates. It's not coming from a place of fear. I got to show up, or I'm going to get fired. It's coming from a place of I want to make an impact. And I see what's at stake for all of us working together. I have ownership of this. It's coming from a place of a desire to want to make an impact, which is very different than coming from a place of fear. So it's very rare that someone will fall off track, but it happens. Usually there's something going on with them personally. And sometimes the team says, and you know what? Take a couple of weeks, go get some therapy. They might be, it's always love and empathy is the key, right? It's not about, well, you're not doing your job for 3 days, we're going to fire you. It's more like, what can we do to help you get back on track? Well, I'm going through some difficulty right now. You know what? Take a couple of weeks, go deal with that. We got your back. We got it covered. Very different mindset, right? Versus a place where a boss might say, well, I need someone performing here all the time. You're out. And then you got to go hire someone and retrain them. It's like it's counterintuitive. This works better. It's more supportive and it's more accountable. So all those decisions are made by the teams based on the knowledge they have across their financials and everything else so that they can make decisions like when you empower everybody to act like the CEO, those questions, they disappear because you just get it done. You're all acting as leaders to move the needle forward.
So other questions that come to mind, and these are unrelated questions, so you keep them in the back of your mind and address them one at a time, I guess, is, okay, so if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to start a business and I'm going to invest my money and my time to get things, and this is very me-centric kind of statements, is I'm putting in and I'm risking a lot of my own money and my own self and my own time. And so that I'm just going to hire other people or I'm going to bring them into this team environment. But because I've put in supposedly more, of myself, then would I own a greater share? Would I be compensated for my, contributions, at a different level? Are people compensated at different levels? How does compensation along those lines work? And not just, financial compensation, but as an entrepreneur, I'm supposedly, if you've ever been entrepreneurs will tell you that, everybody's like, oh, I get to be my own boss. No, it just means you have 1,000 bosses instead of one. But, you kind of, so along those lines. And then the other question I have is, okay, we still do live in a world where there's like manufacturing and we're still living somewhat in that industrial revolution. This seems to all work well in a knowledge-based environment. But what about even businesses like airlines? Because I was a flight attendant for many years. The first thing that comes
Yeah,
up is how would it
it,
work in those environments?
it could work well in those environments too. I know some chip manufacturers that operate this way. Uh, there's even a electronics manufacturer in China. I think I have 20,000 employees that operates this way. What it does is it gives the teams the empowerment they need to make decisions for themselves. Um, Now, in terms of compensation, where this is, um, it depends on what your value is in terms of your contribution, and you decide that. You could say, look, I'm going to run this business as a CEO. This is what I want as my compensation because I'm going to be doing things I'm going to be out there. There's some value I bring to the table. I have this 30, 40 years of experience that I bring to the table that's going to advance our business. I'm going to be talking with a lot of clients, going to be working with partners. I'm going to be dealing with the banks. There's some intrinsic value that I bring to the table that deserves more compensation.
And I might be working 60 hours a week
And I
instead
might be working a lot more hours and I'm serving a lot more people,
of.
right? But it always comes down to the intention and the consciousness of the individual, right? If I'm an entrepreneur, my mindset is I'm going to build a business. Is this a lifestyle business? Why are you creating this business to begin with? Well, I'm just trying to create some wealth for me and my family. Great. So you're hiring employees to help you create wealth for you and your family. It's not a very high conscious. What's in it for them? They get a job? It's not very motivating, right? So, and that ends up, you might hire people and you have to pay them well to come work for you and do their job. But you also can have the consciousness that I can't achieve that kind of wealth without good people. So you might have a different approach to how you create an environment where they can feel empowered. So you might decide, you know what? This does help me, but I want to help them too. How do I create a model where everybody wins? Because they got to take care of their families too. So do you have to give up something for that, or do you create a model where everybody can win? Every circumstance is different. And then there's those entrepreneurs who stand for something. They have a greater mission, a purpose. And the company is just the vehicle to fulfill that purpose, something grand, something that impacts the world. And so they're not as motivated by taking all the cash they possibly can out of the business. They're motivated by creating an impact. And they want to invite people who are equally committed to the same purpose. Because most people, we all have similar desires, right? It's just a matter of finding those who resonate with your purpose. And then those employees will be joining something that is already meaningful to them. And of course, you want to create a model where everybody's is well compensated based on their input, but everybody's committed to a greater purpose. It's not just about work. So it's got greater meaning. And some people will be willing to make less money in something that has greater purpose, versus those where, they may be walking into an environment that doesn't feel very empowering. So you better take care of them. The way they justify is, I'm not going to have a lot of freedom, but they're paying me well. So I get to do more for my family as a result of this. It always comes down to intention and consciousness. You could be in a horrible job, but with the right intention and consciousness, i.e., you get to take care of the needs of your family, you can find joy in it. And you could be the leader of a company where you want to take care of your family, but also have a greater impact. So you create purpose around your business and you attract people that are equally committed to that purpose. And you decide, you know what, I'm going to share some of my wealth. I'm going to give up a little bit of myself because this purpose means more to me than anything else, but I have to take care of my family as well. And I do want to create some wealth, but maybe I got some partners that want to do the same thing. So they're going to contribute just as much, which means they're going to be more productive, more impactful in the marketplace. There's plenty to go around for everyone. It always comes down to intentionality. Your intention and your consciousness will decide which direction you take. But it's not one size fits all. You can have a single proprietor and still create a decentralized, self-managed environment. You can still be the one to go to for all financial decisions and have tremendous empowerment across the organization. It's not a one size fits all. It's really dependent on each circumstance. But even in manufacturing, same thing. It always comes down to what you're trying to create and why are you trying to create it, and can you attract people that are equally interested. The ones who have the most difficulty are those who just, I just want to make a lot of money. And that's okay. If that's your purpose, you're going to attract people who want to make a lot of money, which means you can't just hire people and not pay them a lot of money because they're committed to the same purpose you are, which is to make a lot of money. So alignment in mission and purpose plays a big role in how well a company and a team synergizes. And a lot of companies fail at this. You have to have a mission and a purpose and hire people that are equally committed to it, or you're always going to have disconnect and you're always going to have disengagement. And then you've got to create a model where it empowers people to contribute on their terms. Otherwise, you're always going to have disengagement. And you might be successful and you might do well, but you're not as good as your competitors who decide to run it differently than you.
Yeah, some of the examples, real world examples that I can think of, and I think these are, first of all, I think B Corps are, if people don't understand, instead of like an S Corp or a C Corp where it's just, you have shareholders and how you're defining shareholders. I wouldn't say your shareholders are your purpose, but you're more purpose driven. Like one of the things that frustrates me is when your let's say a C Corp, which would be, your great big Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies get heavily invested in I don't want to say political, but they are sometimes political. They're yeah, they invest in social issues.
They
And
take sides on a case, on a situation, whether it's a
right,
social issue or a political issue, et cetera, right?
right. And they may be social issues and things like that. So to me, if you're going to do that, you need to be a B Corp because then you're set up to do that, and your shareholders and your people that are involved are actually saying, okay, I'm signing on to this organization because of their social, activism or whatever it is. And so to me, I would be frustrated if I went to work for a organization and they went against what I consider to be my values, and they were investing the money in something that I didn't feel like was, aligned with what my values were. And they were using that outside of the organization to promote these different things. So I think if people understood that maybe there is an avenue for that, there's a vehicle and a mechanism to do that. But that's, I think, why B corporations were set up. And then there's cooperatives. Cooperatives are one of my favorite. And they have, oh, I can't even think of the word right now. They're not dividends, but okay, my electricity in my rural area is provided to me by a cooperative. But even though I am a quote customer, I am a shareholder to some degree in this business. And when it makes a certain amount of money, that money comes back to me in terms of not dividends. What's the word I'm looking for? They have a special word in the cooperative world.
Distribution.
Yeah, it's a distribution. And so, and on top of that, I have the opportunity to go. I mean, you always get these things in the mail when are like my life insurance says, oh, here's a shareholders meeting. Would you like to come? Nobody ever goes. Nobody ever even pays attention. But my local electrical cooperative, I'm more inclined because it's more local. It's, and it's something that directly affects me. It's my electricity. I'm going to pay more attention to what's going on in that organization and want to be more of a part of it. And then, what was the other one that I was thinking? So when I'm thinking of these types of organizations, whether they be cooperatives or B corporations, or, okay, let's get into nonprofits and things like that, that align more with your values. I mean,
Yeah.
I like,
I think those mechanisms can help, but it comes down to something really simple, which is one of the elements of the EmpathIQ framework, which is uh, empathy always wins. And I help organization see things from a design thinking angle. Your highest ideal is always people and the needs of people, not just their transactional need. Having a job and paying the mortgage is a transactional need. So you can cater to that transaction or you can elevate it. The legal framework for how you're structured, it has some inherent values, one versus the other. And I agree with you. In a C Corp, if you're the CEO and you've got a personal view on certain things, and now you're driving the whole organization to drive towards that personal view, you're actually kind of abusing power in that sense, right? You're not there to do that. That's not what the company stands for. But in a B Corp, might be a little different. Unless in that C Corp, it's something that came out of a big exercise as a team where everybody defined their values and their purpose as a company together. And part of defining their purpose, they decided we want to go do this and stand for this. And you've got a lot of companies that do that very well. Patagonia and REI, many companies who do wonderful things for society in the world. But they are collectively committed to it. So when you hire people, they know what they're getting into. I think it gets challenging when you're in a company where you're operating a certain way, and then a leader comes in and takes you a different path and introduces things, and there's no discussion about those things. It just gets decided, and now you have to follow along, right? That's the problem with command and control. How do you know that everybody else is aligned to it? Unless you've engaged with everyone, unless you've practiced empathy, unless you've done some of the things that design thinking, been curious, uh, understood people's needs, connected with them, and let that bubble up. Unless you've done that work, you're just pushing your own agenda. So it always comes down to consciousness. Are you here to improve the lives of people, or are you here to just improve yours? And there are two types of people, really, when it comes down to leaders. There are those who are looking for ways to serve others, and there are those who are looking for ways to take from others. So if you're I'm building this business and it's all about the money, what can I take from you to help me generate more money? That's only going to take you so far. But if you're I'm here to generate some income and we're going to make some impact on society, here's what we care about. How can I help you make that impact? That's someone willing to serve someone else. And which means when you come into that organization, you already know what they stand for. In fact, you're drawn to it because of what they stand for. So it's tricky in some cases. In That's why I actually believe large organizations, C corps, and traditional companies that don't have a purpose start getting involved with taking sides of politics. That's dangerous play. You're alienating a good number of your employees. You're assuming everybody sees it the way you do, and they don't. Unless you've had that conversation across the entire organization and gotten agreement, you're actually disrespecting your entire employee base by assuming that they'll go along with what you want to go along with because you have the power to do so. That's control. That's not, there's no love there. There's no empathy there. And so in those organizations, 76%, 80% of people are disengaged globally. 70% of people are disengaged in the US because of that. They're disengaged because of the ability for one person to decide everybody's fate. No adult will stand for that. So they show up to work already quiet quitting, do what they have to do to take care of their family, but they're not really there to help you win. They're not. Unless you engage them and given them the power to make an impact, to contribute, they're not they're not signed off on this just because you have the power to push them in that direction. Because the threat is if they don't follow you, take away their job. That's a form of violence, right? So, so you can have that policy in any company, no violence, 100% accountability. If you just put those policies in place, the whole dynamic changes. Which means as a CEO, I can't force you, I can't coerce you, I can't use fear tactics, and I can't use your salary to convince you to go do something I want to do. But if I engage with you because you are 100% committed to success, you are 100% accountable to our success, and I engage with you and I get you to collectively agree to something, now we are all committed to this as a team, then it's a whole different game. And it doesn't matter whether you're B Corp, C Corp, partnership, it all comes down to whether you are engaging people and respecting their views and bubbling those up in a way that's consensus based, where the majority decides this is the direction we want to go. Now, it's not coming from a place of command, it's coming from a place of agreement.
Yeah, and I think that's, to kind of summarize in this conversation, I go back to one of the reasons that I named my program Harmonic Leadership is because there was three leadership models that I really liked. There was what we call conscious leadership, and that's a very esoteric idea, very hard to define, but it's, I think we all on some level intuitively understand it. And then there's the servant leadership model, which you've talked a lot about. And I really focus heavily on is, am I here as a leader to serve the organization and to serve you and my customers by extension? Or am I here to, take what I can and you're just there to help me accomplish my goals? And then there's this other, what we call quiet leadership. It's just, I don't like to call it leading from behind because I don't believe people lead from behind. Um, but it's just a person who doesn't need to be that soloist, doesn't need to be out front, doesn't need to be the star. It's not like all the light is shining on them. They are just there quietly behind the scenes, doing what needs to be done to help other people. And to me, that's where this harmonic, when you bring these three types of leadership models together, and that's really what this is all about. It's not so much about the nuts and bolts of how this works, because like you said, it works different in every situation. And it's not about the legal structure behind it, although that can come into play. It's really about this whole leadership model of
Yeah.
just, you know,
Like every archetype, you have the higher self and the lower self, the shadow self, right? So in those shadow leaders, there could be those who are influencing in a positive way, and then there's those who are also influencing in a negative way, right? Like every archetype has the hero and the villain, the four archetype that Carl Jung talks about, right? The lover could be either someone who serves others or takes from others, and the king or queen is someone who either serves their community or is a tyrant.
mhm,
And so you've got the shadow self of these things. So I believe in shadow leadership because it can be very influential from behind or the side or wherever you want to look at it, but it could also be very dangerous and toxic too. So it's a tricky one, which is why I like the idea of transparency. Just bring everybody into the fold and trust that people will want to make an impact, will want to grow, will want to give meaning to what they're doing, and will want to belong to something greater than themselves. It's an inhuman innate desire. And also we're problem solvers. So
mhm.
put the challenge out there and then let people step up to it. Give them the tools, train them, coach them, give them the information, and watch what happens. It's experiential. It's one of those things like it's counterintuitive to maybe how you think about it. Someone has to be in charge. No, try it and then watch what happens.
Yeah, I like that. Just we're so adverse to trying something new sometimes because it's just we hold on so dearly to tradition, to the way things have been done, because and we might tweak things a little bit here around the edges because if we make too big of a change, it might just blow the whole thing up. Well,
Well, it's complicated, Cheryl, because for some people, their self-identity is tied to where they are on their leadership
mhm,
journey. So
yes.
suddenly saying, I've got to disempower myself, that's how some will look at it.
Hmm.
And it's like that's not what it is at all. This is part of your journey is getting to this realization and that your truest job as a leader is to create other leaders.
Hmm.
What better way to be influential than to enable someone else to lead? You will be forever remembered as contributing to someone's growth. That's servant leadership. It pays big dividends in the future too. No one will remember if you build $1 billion company when
Hmm.
you're gone, but people will remember the impact it had on their lives.
Hmm.
You know, do you want to be the boss whose employees go home and talk positively about their job and their kids listen and get encouraged, and then the community gets encouraged
Hmm.
and society is happier? Or do you want to be the boss who just takes as much as you can and makes people feel miserable and they just continue to contribute to the psychosis that's the society of today? We have such a huge responsibility as leaders to create environments where people can feel good about themselves and feel good about showing up to work. It's a duty, and it's about time we step into it.
I like that. I think it's time we step into that new role of leadership. And I, I think in summary, that's great. I think of, as a parent, do I want to empower my kids to grow up to be better people, than, a better person, I guess I should say, than I am? Do I want to, help them rise to become the best person they can be? Well, of course I do. And I think even parents who have that authoritative tendency, still deep down inside, that's really what they want. Their methods may not be the right way, but deep down inside, that's what we want to do. And for some reason, we've never looked at the people that we work with in that light. We always look at them as somebody to accomplish our own ends. Whereas if we took maybe on the more of the attitude of a parent, that I think the reason we don't is partly because, and I'm just thinking out loud here, is because we don't want to treat our employees like children. But if we treated our children more like employees, if we, the whole idea of helping everybody rise.
Well, that begs the big question, right? Because a really good parent actually doesn't tell their children what to do. They give them the
Exactly.
tools they need to make good decisions for themselves.
Yes.
So it comes down to being a good parent, even at home. Like a good parent is not a tyrant. It's someone who's helping a child become a well-adjusted, independent adult, right?
Yeah.
So that they can become a leader. Really, as a parent, what are we trying to do? Raise adults. What does that mean? That means that they can lead their own lives.
Yes.
So at work, it's no different. As a leader, help them lead their own lives, help them lead their own department, help them lead the company, just the
Mhm.
same way we would do with children. So actually, good parenting is servant leadership too.
Exactly.
Sometimes you gotta like, hey, if
Yeah.
depending on the age, right? If they don't recognize the danger, then you gotta be like, hey, I have to put the hammer down because you're gonna hurt yourself, right? But once you become consciously aware,
Mhm.
that doesn't work. You know,
Exactly.
makes them rebel just the same way it makes employees rebel.
Exactly. So I think on that note, that's a good note to end on. So what are your socials? How can people reach out to you? And
Best way to find me is on tuliosiragusa.com. All my socials are there, blogs there, everything, my speaking profile, everything is there. TULLIOSIRAGUSA.com. There's a lot of videos that explain the Empath IQ framework and lots of blogs, a lot of design thinking principles blogs. So just check it out.
sounds good. And I'll put all that in the show notes so that it's easily accessible. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Uh-huh. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating to help others discover this valuable content. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps us continue creating engaging episodes for our listeners.